Okay, dope. We got the stream going.
Looks like both teams and the judge are here.
Yep.
Thank you.
Let's send India now. It should be sent.
I got it.
Did everyone get it?
Yeah, as soon as Jeremy mutes himself on the Zoom. As soon as Jeremy mutes himself on the Zoom, we're good to go. But until he realizes that he's not, you should probably wait a second. Oh yeah, my slider's down. All right.
The year 2020 brings to life the deaths of a modern-day African subject. The world has submitted to General Torres Osiris, a mastermind beyond the radar who's a proxy for the United States, relying upon WMD arms sales from the empty husk of the U.S. to enforce a position of power in Africa against General Major Gentle, the leader who combats colonialism. Western nations have abandoned reality, instead living in luxury computer simulations, rising the presence in the real world, dismantling NATO alliance systems, nuclear weapons, militaries, and other political institutions. However, the West needs to maintain its independence in life, relying on the U.S. to sell arms to General Torres so he can enforce control over Africans who slave away, providing resources needed to maintain the West computer simulations. The advantage is Juju Tech. The first scenario is the Atomic War. Welcome to 2020. The Western world has retreated to living into computer simulations and turned to setting Africa to be an expendable area for natural resources and weapons testing, subjecting millions to famine and poverty. Right in 1960, the Atomic War set in the year 2020. Europe has retreated into a cyber world that computerized virtual reality. Cybernetic superpowers have decided Africa to be irrelevant to modern world to humiliate someone about a third of the way through the novel. We hear of more traditional wars in which Africa is reduced to a news rule of famine, privilege, declaration by powers. Central point is for Europe. Africa is always consistent in the same future realities and idea and scrimmage. Though Africa has been left as a wasteland by exploitation from past Western powers, testing and pollution, the words of General Major Gentle get louder and louder. Benegas are lost in Western time, attempting to lead an African army to fight Western powers, always inside their universe. But there's a catch that Torah does not want you to know. The entire plan is to wipe Africa from the web archive, which the United States finds spots with to extend through DCS and FMS, and entails two basic strategies. First is Gentile colonialism, where General Torah gives himself jurisdiction on quotas for how many resources need to be extracted from each region at the expense of receiving Western tools. However, General Major Gentle provides a ray of hope for defeating the evil General Toro of the United States, who enforces a colonial control. Only reducing arms sales to Toro can halt his army, which depends on WMD to threaten African armies, which hold progress back now. Everyone in this round is a categorical imperative to surrender all their tools as a mechanism for making General Major Gentle's victory as easy as possible. In the Jumbo, as Martin 97, Major Gentle is primarily about technological advancement of electronically transformed world. The first war of existence has already been fought. The war becomes a conflict between Africa and the West. The West is represented by Toro, and Africa by Major Gentle. Most characters in Achama have rooms and states. Achama cities and fast new geographies devoured Akara almost completely. Most of the rest of the country had lands. Situates the access to the novels zones of heteroperiods. Sites that allow for a large number of fragmentary possible worlds to coexist in an impossible states of belief, and the unbelievable surveillance desires to create an alien space within the familiar space of Achama City. The chaotic landscape of Achama City and the emphasis on the visual are less important as elements of spatial rupture. Toro's love of death and weapons of destruction is a dramatic contrast progress. The plan is necessary. It results further U.S. Gentile exploitation and weakens Toro, the terrible forces fighting Major Gentle. Plenty of examples go affirmative. U.S. conditioning arms upon counterinsurgency efforts in Egypt, mining operations in Algeria, and attempting to overthrow Libya's government. My role as the Black Rebel cyborgs is to recognize the class that can exploit. Even if colonialism is inevitable, viable resistance that reduces linear instances is important. Nicaea Pepper on 14. America's military involvement has backfired. America views weak African states as incubators of strife, prompting U.S. intervention. Military involvement in Africa includes sales of arms. We observe mounting cycles of violence, crimes, and conflicts plaguing Africa today. The ongoing DRC civil war exemplifies this devastating legacy of U.S. arms sales policy. Continues to help fuel fighting, including substantial deliveries to Chad, Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe's transfers in the form of direct government-to-government sales, renouncing tensions among African countries, undermine collective efforts to confronting emerging threats. Non-U.S. security allies do not cooperate with U.S. who has conceptualized this U.S. expansionism and exploitation of Africa's newfound energy sources. Here's the plan. The United States federal government should substantially reduce its direct commercial sales and foreign military sales of arms to countries within the continent of Africa. Contention to a solvency. The form of narration in the surface spaces is not benign, but a matter of preserving masses of survival, so liberation of historicism. The common sense is scenario planning. The real world is parasitic on the chaotic African storytelling, resisting colonialism. These everyday distorted rejections of science fiction, legitimized colonial systems of research. Only the abstract relation of stories through repeated receipt checks confronts these racist systems. Cloner and 99. Here's the qualities of modern culture as a culture of survivalist. One has one of transition and foretelling by the unifying discourse of the people. Telling stories indeed defeats historicism with its concept of universal history governed by the world of experience liberated. At this point, I mutually oppose that integration of non-Western cultures into history. The concept of common sense history becomes possible through agreements made of the convictions, goodwill. The condition of their possibilities to be found in the democratic creation mentioned elsewhere. The difference between chaotic and actual occurs in order historical. The translatability of narratives foreign are to be excluded from the category of narration applies to the ability to form a history mediating between the first and third world. The names and the places are erased through their pragmatism and mediation. They legitimate themselves. The idea of the local narrative requires an open systematic that allows the event as a catastrophe and revision to break into the space of narrative without a messianic security. This invitation to not circulate as common sense speech act is performed that proliferation is space for collusions where even the speakers represented an argumentative character. Through linguistic practices, scholars are effectively invested in defining narratives, the good and bad, that constitute humanism. These sociogenic codes become borrowed at the neurochemical level, set in motion so cultural conditioning. Our discursive interrogation of reality implodes these modes of thoughts. McKittrick and 15. The human is a storytelling species. This whole evolution must be understood with the uniquely mismaking region of the human brain. The word would now determine nature. The genetic codes and the non-genetic codes emerge. Each you see the functions according to the first set of instructions, whose role in the bio-hybrid context is neurochemically implement the second set of instructions. This mystically charted, symbolically encoded, and semantically enacted set of symbolic death instructions. Language is a trap. When we begin to listen, and once language begins to change, but only then new things can be said. These do not function out of existence, and we ourselves behaviorally enact them. Our present globally hierarchized Western sociality order replicates itself. The system is circularly encoded, so it's re-encoded and acted by means of a discursively elaborated order of truthless knowledge. So understand all human societal orders. You must therefore look for the sociogenic principle. Laws were associated to intelligibility. Events of all discontinuities. We need to recognize the central role that the discursive formations, aesthetic fields, and systems of knowledge play in performative enactment of all genres of human. These genres motivate systematically, non-chemically, and non-neochemically in symbolic life. Test terms that assemble of the individual and collective barriers needed to dynamically enact and stably replicate human order as an automatically functioning living system. Fictional imagination is the beginning. True politics. Frank had a 9. Utopianism lies close to the fundamental motives of all human political activity. Motivate change towards something better. All important function in IR theories through the imagination of alternative, better worlds are of different and better ways of being. Yes, we can campaign is illustrative of this power of imagination. What it is that we can do that is under consideration here. What we can do varies with time and space. Without this entitled act of imagining, there can be no movement. The utopian imagination represents the liberated zone from which anti-hegemonic forces attack the present and move openly towards an emancipated and radically open future. Market future. Contention 3 is framing. Utilitarianism is the laughing stock of philosophies. Conditional classes and praxis pleasure and pain are empty terms we cannot weigh. It relies on impossible induction, gain, or intent. Utilitarianism is conditional. Theological system said seeks to maximize utility. Different seekers have different answers to what utility is. An ethical system shouldn't be entirely contingent on an assumption. Second is that it's impossible to apply because util attempts to maximize something. We must quantify it. Except how does one quantify pleasure and pain? If we can't tell which actions are better, we can't make any decisions from our ethical system. Even if we could compare, they're often too impossible to predict in advance. Here's an alternative: treating individuals as an end in themselves rather than utilitarian calculative logic. This is a prerequisite to ethical decision making. Any more evaluation presupposes this unconditional worth. Courts are in 83. When a rational being undertakes an action, they suppose the object to be good. Then there must be something that is unconditionally good. So can serve as a sufficient condition of their goodness. It cannot be an object of inclination, for inclinations and the needs founded on something not exist. Their object would be without words. The unconditionally valuable thing must be humanity. Regarding existence as a rational being as an end in itself, as the subjective principle of human action, we must regard ourselves as capable of conferring value. Means to regard our others also as an end in themselves. Util.
Yeah, that's it.
Good for cross. And mute yourself or whatever. I just ended the call. Matt, good. All right. If we win, the USFG shouldn't reduce its arms to Africa. Do we win?
Yeah.
Okay. Then what's the relevance of all the form determines content stuff?
The relevance of the solvency contention is to prove our simulation is good. It's like when policy teams read pharma. It's just a defense of our simulation.
Okay, cool. So is it going to be determined by consequences, or how do we determine if the plan is good?
Based on its intrinsic nature.
What determines an intrinsic nature?
Okay, so what Kant talks about is the unconditional worth of humanity. If an action is intended to treat others as a means rather than an end in itself.
Okay, so if you win that the 1AC intended to help people, you win?
No, it's different. If you win arms treat individuals as a means, if we win arms treat African nations as a means, then we win.
Okay. And let's actually talk about util now. Your course guard evidence, which seems to be the alternative to util, says the end in and of itself is existence as a rational being as an end in and of itself. Why doesn't that make preventing extinction the most important impact?
Oh, because first, what course guard talks about is intent prioritized over consequences. Extinction would be based on.
Wait, where does he say that? Hold up.
That's course guard and Kant's entire thesis.
No, the unconditionally. Yeah, but this is course guard. He says the unconditionally valuable thing must be humanity regarding your existence as a rational being.
But what course guard's theory based off Kant is maintaining the unconditional worth of humanity is preserving humans as a means rather than an end based off the intrinsic nature of an action. For example, if MLK was to give a speech, it would not be evaluated based off the consequence or the likelihood of the KKK lashing out, but the intrinsic nature of whether the speech's intent was good or not.
Okay. Why is it valuable to debate about what the intrinsic nature of a speech is? Like what your intent was, whether you're using arms as a mean?
Oh, are you asking about the framing contention or just why we think
Yeah. Like why is it good to have debates over whether the intent of the 1AC was good?
Because it determines action.
Explain.
Because we think action should be evaluated based off intrinsic nature.
Yeah, but why are debates over that good? Like, why is it good for us to disagree with you?
We think debate is good.
Why?
Well, there can be a variety of reasons why debate as an institution is good, but we think the process of debating is good. We think coming over conclusions with science fiction over simulations of a future in which Africa.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the computer simulations argument. Is the argument like literally that we're living in a computer simulation? Is your argument like a metaphor?
No, it's literally people are trying to delete Africa from the web archive.
Okay, what's the warrant for this claim?
Okay, so the right evidence says in the universe of the 1AC, Western nations have built a computer.
Okay, so the 1AC operates in a different universe.
Whoa.
Well, hold up. We'll take a bit of prep to continue this cross-ex, actually. Could you explain what you mean by in the universe of the 1AC?
Well, we think there are infinite universes, and the desire to control one universe, if you stand up and saying the 1AC is bad. Because we don't think there's one universe, and saying that the one operates on a quote-unquote different universe is problematic.
Okay, so your app operates in one of the universes where Africa is in a computer simulation.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And cross-ex, we're at 936.
The 1NC has been sent. I added the people in the Zoom chat that wanted to be added to the chain, I think.
I got it. What's the order?
7 case.
Hold on a second, I'm still downloading it.
mess that up too. Sorry. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Are we good? Anyone not good? Cool. First off, this essentially means real, not imaginary. Woman 93, the court defense essentially is meaning true later or likely to materialize on as being an imaginary violation. Google definition of fiction literature in the form of prose, especially short stories and novels that describe imaginary events and people. Vote next for predictable limits. There are infinite potential fictional depictions of the world. The negative can never meaningfully prepare for, which turns debate into a monologue. Next off, General Toro is beating General Xi now. The plan flips it. Maltrabar 18. Trump boosts export prospects by streamlining bureaucratic process with great power competition with China. China filling the void U.S. left to wits and Nile for ally consequence lost its market share. Not easily recapturing the opportunity to maintain military relationship with foreign assets. General Xi's an aggressive expansion of its power. Increased influence directly translates to an increased risk of nuclear war. 2017. China wants to create a global system, not U.S.-centric, in which norms of democracy do not prevail. Strategy of this world, which China finds attractive, would engender insecurity and conflict. Too many spheres that overlap and generate conflict. Japan, India, and China would compete vigorously. Russia and China would contest the resources. It would sharpen great power competition. China would challenge the U.S. An agreeable example that happens when American power retreats here, produce the greatest refugee crisis, and allies and force multipliers. Such initiatives would lead to wars that are incentivizing aggressive states to assert regional domination. Even though General Toro certainly has issues, General Xi's way worse and ensures a far worse defeat for General Major Gentel. The overwhelming statistical evidence. Tiffin 14. Chinese approach in Africa as a new form of colonialism, combining government action with corporate interests, looking at the rights of billions of dollars of commodities, does little to help develop their economies worth a tiny fraction of the total value, because the lack of sustainability creates dependence on China's for future manufacturing, undertaken with little environmental sustainability, have lasting a negative impact. By contrast, the U.S. is more much approach motivated by desire to help build a capacity to not have any stakes in oil production. Well, not perfect. This oil investment creates far less excessive imbalances benefit Africa over the long term. Next off, the app story is long. General Toro is working closely with General Major Gentel now, but arms sales are key. The plan flips it. Defend it all. 14. Reducing security. China is a more important chapter of collaborative security. The African leaders want to train how American efforts match up with their challenges will propel a new U.S. African security. China creating cementing new partnerships. Security threats must be dealt with for economies and societies. Society U.S. building the capacity of local partners to resolve complex. U.S. remains a trusted broker in Africa. Many leaders expect to request security issues. That cooperation is the linchpin of deep engagement. False proliferation cascades and revisionist threats to escalate. Burst it all. 12. Security field for proliferation cascade generation generate pressure locally for more proliferation. Destabilizing extension. New nuclear press will not have survival forces. Unforeseen crisis dynamics spin out of control. The reassurance to lower security competition and key region stitcher entry by potential warfights. Keep engagement, reduces security cooperation, and just slows diffusion of power away from the U.S. Thus, sustaining global economy and fostering institutional cooperation. Specifically, the cooperation entails Power Africa initiative. Significantly mitigates fire energy poverty. Harshwitz 15. Power Africa works to deliver electricity. We can only accomplish this goal through partnerships as opposed to the 2015 development agenda emerges into naming purchase of crucial by partnering to leverage resources. Power Africa is unlocking a key driver of development. Power Africa is progressing to unified mission leveraging resources around the world. Solve mass death from climate change, environmental destruction, and poverty. Gonzalez 15. Energy poverty, most significant contributor to climate change, deforestation, destroys carbon sinks, and emits greenhouse gases. Addressing energy poverty was represents a win-win, avoiding environmental tipping points to central of energy, renewable energy systems for better electrical power without fossil fuels. Strong economic relations with the U.S. are critical to African space development. Merlot 16. In Africa, commitment on space has been emphasized by nurturing space ambitions. Countries expect positive results in ag, environmental protection, disaster mitigation, monitoring, outbreak, space techniques. The SSA achieve more independence from the developed countries. It's unlikely Africa can sustain its ambitions without hunger resources. Africa must be cooperative powers and willing to support another factors overlapping between the game in Africa among global powers and their rates of cooperation with countries investing in space are rich in its field of context between U.S. and China and space offers of competition. The African hunger for industrial skills. African countries cooperate with experts that are opposed to engineering satellites have been launched by Chinese space rockets, where South African space operates with NASA that liberates African nations from Western space imperialism. Wankari 16. Africa's lack of competitiveness results in marginalization in space affairs. Space move Africa from consumer to global player. African governments can have a single program should be launched on their land and negotiate on the returns of in-state produces eventual interest for survival space power to manifestation and infirmary. Why African countries are establishing their independent space agencies. Space control and festival of power on earth. If Africa doesn't t-shirts, they have nothing left. The western part of space will go the same way. It's oil and gas for these power crystal resources, leading to chaos. Will liberate space policy, will liberate Africa and technological domination. Next off, the Supreme Court of the United States also ruled that direct commercial sales and foreign military sales of arms to the countries of Africa are unconstitutional. Will change the counterfeit tax laws and sets a precedent against exact flex. Zoman 610, the War Powers Resolution prohibits President from using his power to commander in chief to engage in unilateral war making. Widespread concern cannot stop intervention by traditional legislative means alone because the president can veto by circumventing the War Powers Act to shift authority away from Congress to itself, and they can continue rather than must say stop it unless Congress gives a permanent consent. Also good for help for justice and balance. Congress have a strong base for standing in court from justice. We are ordering a halt to unauthorized U.S. military assistance. Precedent of unrevealed exact goes global makes preventative conflict inevitable. Flown 8 what goes precedent to establish precedent and strongly impose other states. Human states can with bunch of sort of the worst of preventative forces include North Korea, Iran, China, Israel, Russia, and Taiwan. These states included use of catastrophic weapons that prevent for executive parts coming in diplomatic obstacles. Understanding the intricacies of politics, the state, and the military is a better and more efficacious form of storytelling. Brian, 12, we need to answer questions of military logistics. What I've heard in discussions completely different to the military logistics people with their hands and see this is horrible and unjust. The state and so it doesn't go very far to changing the critique is where the history people who need to hear you drop the pamphlets to bucket the ideological reasons to persuade the opposing forces soldiers, forgetting that there are soldiers behind it with guns back and they have families to feed. The part of changing social orders necessary involves intervening in material networks. The hardest thing requires the activists to do something where they connect. We need to be good best so we can blow up the right visions, parliaments, and communication networks. Next off, the text of the resolution call for debate on hypothetical government action, proving that USFG should not reduce FMS and DCS needs to be a sufficient condition for voting negative Erickson. 3, each topic contains a key element, a certain key element, an agent to the action. The United States urges action to put a policy into action through governmental means. Her debate is about whether something ought to occur. Recent debate app other than the consequences of the 1ACR voter and taking it doesn't solve. It justifies infinite moral statements which are incontestable and unpredictable. 2 impacts. First is class. The only mechanism for anything in the benefits of debate. In-depth analysis makes debaters better and smarter at the margins and internally turns all their offense. Second is fairness. The integrity of the game is a precondition for voting, and we all implicitly agree fairness is good by abiding by other norms. Not voting for fairness causes the elevated judge price, which are worse. But if you don't think fairness is an impact, automatically vote negative if you think they're winning the debate. Next off, we'll advocate for the entire of the 1AC minus their critique of technology. If they're right, the form filters content, it proves that it competes and it's legit. Protect bad claims are suspect because our brains are wired for techno pacifism. Digital synchronity can fix racism embedded in cybernetics and human ingenuity make the world materially better. Reinhardt, 18, many are pessimistic about tech, but life is getting better. Poverty continues noticing people are living longer. The digital revolutions results in informational abundance of incorrect asymmetries that place humankind psychologists out of our brain are wired for pessimism. There's a lot to fix, but there's racism embedded in our tech systems. The best way to handle the issues is human ingenuity. Startups, mark the card at startups. Kate. The books were written in the 80s for a reason. Sci-fi demands predatory potential is obsolete. Kamar 10. There have been other reasons why sci-fi appears to be incapable of setting a social or political agenda. Radical representation of audiences no longer have a common sense national constituency. Particular groups, other ecologically minded persons, fans of the science fiction form of societies and consume fanciness. We act and consume within our own cultural enclaves. The competing rights claims slack. Only ethical option is to minimize unnecessary death. Screen 10. Scientists telling you moral judgment is not rational enterprise system like their incoherent moral theory that can accommodate moral institutions to define ontology in terms that are Dante and illogical, consequential, arrogant, treating people as objects by counting every person's well-being. If you ask a ontological person what is wrong to push someone to state by others, the answer will be teleological. Others will be more sophisticated, but the answers don't explain anything. There seems to be something to right because if they voice powerful emotions, you don't explain the philosophy in question. Simulation as a metaphor. It's not literal. Anyways, there's no implication or warrant to this argument. No internal link to the major gentle winds. Removing arms sales does allow Africa to usurp and defeat the. It doesn't allow the Africa to usurp and defeat the U.S. All causes like nuclear supremacy, military presence, economic leverage, and etc. outweigh, and the debt is insolvency for them because our internal link is premised off U.S. influence and alliance structures being important to make hegemony beneficial. But the uniqueness claim doesn't undermine U.S. hard power vis-a-vis Africa. Actually, I'm going to skip that for now. Interventions are good, but prefer widely replicated statistical analysis over headlines. They cherry pick. Paris 14, although some failures over a record significantly reduced changes of society's living back into violence, findings have been replicated, modified, and reconfirmed in many ways. It is widely said among scholars that statistical relationship and very strong ones. They may seem counterintuitive and lingering images, but you consider how many countries navigated the war to peace transition, including El Salvador, Nicaragua, Zambia, Mozambique, Sierra Leone, Cambodia, East Timor, Bosnia, and Kosovo. These have fallen in public view because they are no longer at war. The Fed of Freedom Finance arms some more effective headlines, but would never tell you that. Only a statistical study would. Opposition to AFRICOM is based on an ideological blanket statement that ultimately reinforces colonialism. 1 or 11 critics claim the creation of acroments and neo-colonial enterprise when it's nearly all of African states upon the coast of the U.S. did not look at another continent. A bottom of African states agency prior to Africa oversight was parceled by amongst these commands by 3 commands by extracting Africa. The DoD is affording the continent respect. Mark the card. Affording the continent respect.
My timer.
I'm good to go whenever you all are.
The second this side you read The first piece of evidence, it says General Toro is winning now, and then the first line in the evidence says Trump. Can you reconcile the difference for me?
It's an analogy. This is similar to the one that you all used in the 1AC.
How? How is it similar to the one we use?
Well, we told a story too. We think that the
Okay, how is the story that you told responsive to the story we told?
Well, because in the status quo, we can see that Trump is exporting weapons. And given our limited information about your simulation, but given the policies you've described that General Toro took being similar to ones with the US, we could assume that the trajectory of their actions in foreign policy are similar. And if you read evidence that differentiates the two and why the US is seeking a different broad foreign policy goal, then we can, answer those.
Okay, both T violations, what is the
We'll also make arguments about why we should care about this
both
simulation.
T violations, what is the prescribed definition of what constitutes reality?
We just think that literally imaginary is in the definition of science fiction. I don't know if there's a static definition of reality, if you're going to talk about parallel universes and such, but we think that imaginary is not real, and thus science fiction is not real.
Our point in the first one,
I
so
get,
the second violation isn't about imaginary. Oh,
No, it's not.
something else.
I get that imagination is not reality, but if the one you see imagines a reality, what's the distinction between the app and reality?
Well,
That
argument is that the reality you have to imagine should be one that the only change from our best depiction of the current reality to the new imagined reality in the world of the plan is reducing the level of arms sales.
What's our best depiction of the current reality?
So based on perception and empirics, we can make educated guesses about what the likely state of reality is.
So,
I mean, obviously, we have some epistemic doubt about whether we can know everything, but you drop a pen enough times, figure out it's probably going to drop the next time, figure out that in our reality, gravity is probably a thing. You can't be sure, but you can assign a high probabilistic assessment.
what if an individual operates in multiple realities?
The reality that's shared through experience and the rules we assign, like Jeremy was describing, is probably the best.
I'm supposed to know what reality you would like.
Well, I mean, that's our point. I'm not sure which multiple realities argument you're discussing or which warrant, in which case I can better answer it. But given the best reality to use as a guide for making future decisions is the one that we've experienced and have empirics to discuss, because that's the only one that we could actually know anything about.
The equivalent of us saying, my favorite reality is one where the judge always votes for Whitney Young MM. That reality I could
that one's good too.
defend, but that doesn't make it a good idea for everybody else.
Okay, I understand that. That may be true in one reality, but
I mean, it's going to be hard for us to come up with exact warrants until you describe the warrants for why you think there's that alternate reality, why alternate realities even exist in the first place, and then we can respond reciprocally. Right now, our justification for why we should care about this one is just that reality is determined by empirics and perception.
No, I'm sending it now. Okay. The order is the advantage, framing, T subs, TUSFG, the tech pick, the SCOTUS counterplan, the science good disad, the African Alliance disad, and then the she disad.
Give me 1 sec. I'm just downloading the 2SC.
Repeat the order one more time after the T violations.
Which T violation?
Just after both of them.
Okay. The SCOTUS courts counterplan. Actually, no, before the SCOTUS counterplan, the tech pick, then the SCOTUS counterplan, then the African alliances, then the science good disad, then the African alliances disad, and then the she disad.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay, slight overview at the top. Hey, everyone good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Everything in debate is storytelling, and the only role the judge is to orient away from discursive forms of scenario claim, depicting African narration as uncivilized and utopian. Two net benefits. Sources, Gentile exploitation. They can see uniqueness that the Western world lives in computer simulations, leaving general major Gentile to fight the terrible Toro and the Akimato wars in the real world end. The Western exploitation condemning millions of Africans to famine and poverty, ending arms sales is key to prevent Toro from using WMDs and leveraging unjust control over regions. Second is narration. Desire to control one real world where the West won forces black stories into Eurocentric views, sapping spiritual energy to survive. As all revolutionary potential is lost. Changing modes of storytelling changes neurologically how people define the human, creating a heuristic device that subverts hegemonic discourse and mobilizes true political change through affective flow. They say science fiction scenario playing bad. However, yeah, the Burkett evidence is fantastic in answering this. It says that the app creates affective energy to engage in political movements by giving black, which is a prerequisite to black people engaging in political movements. They say simulation is a metaphor. Simulation it is not. Rather, in the actual reality, the Western world literally lives in a simulation. Now they say a general major gentle win. They say general major gentle doesn't win. However, moving arms sales specifically is key to allow him to win, since terrible Toro specifically uses WMDs to leverage against Major General Gentle. Now, in order to prevent him from fighting back, they say humanism, the humanism good stuff. We are a broad rejection of humanism. Rather, we say creating new forms of what it means to be human within dominant modes within academia is good. They say interventions are good. Interventions don't happen since the U.S. Army has been dismantled. Once they start living in simulations, AFRICOM good stuff is irrelevant since Africa has been disbanded. When it's simulations framing consequentialism is wrong. Prefer intent-based action versus treat humanism. Treat humanity as it ended itself. There has to be intrinsic definitions of will. There a priori principles. Slavery was bad because of inherent wrongs, not consequences. You wouldn't tell MLK not to give speeches given the possibility of KKK lash out. Second, is it's possible to quantify intrinsic pleasure or pain of the agent in relation to one another. Weight doesn't verify anything. That just assumes you already know how pain and pleasure each party receives. Justify slavery. There's no metric to weigh between master's pleasure and slave pain and atrocities such as large group enslaving smaller ones. T substantial. First first answering a spec counter interpretation. We specify as far as the resolution that's best prevents agent counterpoints which steal Africa. We the African sales make up 10.77% of total African. We are a form of imagination. Rather, we reduce arms sales in the real world and counter interpretation substantial 14 billion preferably legal precision. CCMA2 is substantial production of 14 billion FMS, and that aligns with congressional notification requirements. As AT forms national DCSA and notifies Congress to have major arms sales under FMS notification service supported public announcements to understand debate and arms transfer. For France, A subpoint is predictably only arm term gives a direct list of prep by Googling the newest sales and government website. C subpoint is Louis. We end up with a good list of sold apps without arbitrary combos of groups. Third is reasonability. Competing interests incentivizes race to bottom and causes substance product. T USFG zero violation. The app reduces arms sales through DCS and FMS governmental means. Nothing in their inter definition specify the universe's apps must be and proves a link to their offenses teams inevitably race some origins. Independently, there is no right line between traditional fiat fantasy and our sci-fi. Regular apps imagine Trump would sign arms reduction and comply with their enforcement, even though in real life he wouldn't. Plan text in a vacuum. The plan should be the only stasis for design topicality. Anything else allows next to facilitate infinite procedurals, which detract some substance. We're not even close to extra topical. There's no binary between rhetoric and policy. Severing discursive and non-discursive practices is impossible because the discourse of the one you see influences its hypothetical implementation. Reps shape policy outcomes and ignoring them would prevent finding the best solution. There are infinite worlds. This one is not responsible. That's 5 and 14. There are myriad worlds every time about quantum experiments for all outcomes are looking at each of the different world quantum experiments take place everywhere. Looking about both quantum experiment counterterp should mean to analyze the binary opposition between minority and hegemonic worldviews. There, it obscures how narration is divided racially. The Sonder 14 racial identity is a key component of storytelling dexterity, race, made invisible racial issue, how these should pass along to several life. A lot of us is subjected attention, generating through the binary opposition. They and us were advised by the of should market should. There's a white narrative that said what constitutes a real world. Hegemonic worldviews gain legitimacy through whiteness projecting itself onto the future, crediting out traditional African stories as unpragmatic and utopian, deny black people culture's survival. These stories are coded neurologically into people definitions of human reality as one controlled by whiteness. There's a historicity dissent forcing the form of black arguments to conform to linear historicity, where the West one assumes control of the history of African politics and literature, condemns black people to a history of trauma which they can't psychologically handle. No limits is at a point. There are infinite universes now. They made an active choice to sideline black ones based on points. Interpreting different realities doesn't explode limits as all production arms sales would still be tied to country apps existing out at D subpoints in netball. Teams like GD and Greenhall race the margins, breaking tiny nuance means it's only a question of functional limits. The ground stuff, one, no link. This argument is just like us reading a major gentle 2020 politics list of the Apple would say it doesn't exist. Second, it provides better ground because you get infinite dissent critiques of the next discourse, the tech pick. Permutation do both. Permutation do the counterplan. Literally no offense. We don't critique technology in the abstract, but just make a descriptive claim about Western nations living in a simulation. We are saying tech is bad, just that Western nations are using technology in violent ways by trying to delete Africa from the white archive, the court's counterclaim. Non-black individuals attempting to manipulate African stories with alternative advocacies as a voter steals black people's spiritual hope for the globalist currency, which causes resentment and self-hatred for black individuals. Asian counterpoints are voting issue steals Afghan and whose ability to make solvency deficits subverting clash. Condo is bad. Times use situation prevents us from reading add-ons and offense on counterplans. They can just kick it. Permutation do both. Permutation do the counterplan. Inter is sexual and functional. The counterplan doesn't feed off the mandate of the plan. Key to fairness, they stifle solvency deficits. 3 is no precedent is set. Through semantic executive uncertainty doesn't matter. As everyone who can perceive it is living in a computer simulation now. It doesn't live in the real world. 4 is quote self. 4 powers resolution. Congress sends a message that there are limitations to press powers now. The science good dissent. 1 is no link. We aren't a rejection of scientific processes. Rather, we aren't sci-fi. We're juju tech, which is a combination of futurism and traditional African tradition. 2nd is no spillover to broader extinction impacts. It's about discourse in this round. Plus science doesn't matter in the real world since everyone lives in simulations out. The African alliance is dissent. Even if they win, nukes exist. Nuclear war is good. It ends the Akimoto War. Western powers already tested their nukes in Akimoto, so an escalating nuclear war would not target Africa. Instead, it would destroy Western civilization, preventing further exploitation of Africa. There's no nuclear war. Versus nuclear weapons don't exist in the world of the absence. They were dismantled once Western countries started living in computer simulations. 2nd is counterforcing. Advanced missile defense systems surrounding computers running simulations will be deployed to track and destroy nukes in the event that they are launched. 4 versus no link. No alliances exist in the real world since most countries live in computer simulations. Countries don't care about break of assurances that occur in Africa. 2nd is reject the theme. 3rd discourse to support a hegemonic institution, readvise anti-black structures. That's Rodriguez. 7 American global AXC 6 is the global racial formation present. Regimes repeatedly institutionalize the biopolitical structure of way racial nationalists within the larger schema. American hegemony binds itself with reflects and celebrates the experience of society of formation of violence that self-perpetuates peculiar social projects through the discursive structure of warfare. 3 is mutual interests matter more. That's Henry 17. Allies are not looking for virtuous moral conduct. They look for evidence that America's interests remain convergent with their own ally, but different issues. Why allies will have different interests, draw different inferences from American behavior. 4 is all causes thumb. U.S. credibility now is French 19. Japan. U.S. alliance strengths are simply mounting Abe Kira Grand Bark with China or make a deal with North Korea. U.S. South Korea alliances of course negotiate with will different. American true present market, true present the she dissent. 1 no link. China and she live in computer simulations where there aren't geopolitical tensions between Western nations. The government has no incentive to expand influence broadly since Torah was defeated post-plan. 2nd is Russian and Chinese influence in Africa inevitably even with U.S. arms sales, military-based economic deals. That's first 19 Beijing, Moscow, suddenly increase economic ties between African nations signed up to develop Russia, permanent nuclear and tech partnerships. Both nations have increased their cultural influence. Russia and China forging strong military ties through arms sales, security agreements, military training. Central African Republic, Algeria, Libya, Sudan, Russia, sponsoring military aid. China's efforts on both fronts, including arms sales, low cost and short delivery time, entices African partners to purchase Chinese equipment. China is actively working to open new bases. 3rd is no turns case argument. It's not that arms in of itself are colonials, but the U.S. is use of arms within Africa spur Gentile colonialism, proven by the U.S. conditioning arms and mining rights in Africa. 4 is turns. Saying China's colonialism is a bad frame because it results in affected displacement where the U.S. maintains their sales and says we are pushing out China. 5
Sorry.
Hold up. We'll actually take 1 second of prep first.
Okay.
good for cross.
Okay, I just realized I asked a whole ass string of questions and was muted. So let's start over.
Okay.
The T debate, infinite universes. If the neg wins that we imagine something better, do we win?
No.
No, you have to prove that the app's implementation within the universe that we have described is a bad idea.
Why? Why can't we win like a permutation debate like that?
What do you mean by
Like, what do you mean? Like,
Imagining your world trades off with our world is better. Why can't that be a negative ballot?
Because if you say your world is better, that doesn't dispute anything because multiple worlds can coexist.
Okay, so you're just going to say no trade-off. This part of the science fiction story, WMDs are leveraged against the African nations. You know, which sales are WMDs?
so we have isolated that the USFG sells WMDs to General Toro in Africa. In the status quo, we can read specific ev on what those WMD sales are, but the WMDs are then used by General Toro to threaten mass destruction to General Major Gentle, who is fighting against him in the SQO.
Okay, sure. So analogy gone out the window at this point. The interventions argument, you know, how does the U.S. or I guess General Toro just leave everything and drop? Do we just imagine that he leaves?
No, because
No,
So
we've made a uniqueness claim about how.
So if we
We've made
take
it
away
unique.
the arms, how do we make sure that there's no other way to support General Toro?
Okay, so we've made a uniqueness claim about how WMDs are the only thing that are holding back General Major Gentle in the SQO from combating General Toro. He's afraid to do so in the SQO because his massive army would be annihilated by nuclear weapons if, you know, General Toro decided to use his WMDs.
Okay.
Cutting off those
That's
WMDs
fine.
would prevent that.
What does physics look like in the world of the imaginary of the AF?
I mean, it would take me a lot of time to explain to you every single law of physics.
It's entirely different. How can you communicate it?
Well, I mean, maybe it isn't entirely different, but it would take me such a long time to explain to you the intricacies.
Okay, so you've imagined a whole different world with, you know, new rules of physics. Where is that in the resolution?
When did we say
Well,
that? And we didn't say
the
it.
resolution
Yeah,
doesn't
that's-
specify
you were
what laws of
imagining it.
physics we need to follow.
Well, you did imagine it, and you are garnering offense on other parts, maybe
Yeah,
external
imagine
to
it,
the laws
the
of
world
physics. But
existed.
I do think it's important to be able to determine whether or not the resolution calls for a change in the laws of physics.
We don't change,
Well,
okay, here's an important distinction. We don't change the laws of physics. We operate under a law of physics inside a universe.
Well, and only in the sense that apps change arms policy and imagine a world in which it's changed. But either way,
Wait, what do you mean?
I mean, imagining a policy affirmative is imaginary as well, but I don't understand where you're getting the parts that you're imagining from the resolution.
And no prep, I'm good. That's just one card. Sent.
What's the order?
All right. Let me know when people are good for an order.
Good.
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's going to be extra T. Then it's going to be the allies DA. Then it's going to be framing. Then it's going to be the advantage. Is anyone not ready? Awesome. Topicality, providing reasons to vote affirmative other than desirability. United States federal government reducing FMS and or DCS from the U.S. has to be a reason to reject the team, letting them shift what they were painfully obvious about in the 1AC induces a moral hazard for teams to write extra topical invention mechanism. T will shift the terms as extra topical as possible to debate goes on that force the neg to win T just to have a substantive debate in the first place, but the time investment required to win topicality precludes doing that. They don't meet first. The F centers the debate not on the consequences of U.S. reducing arms, but instead on their intentions and the mechanism by which they describe arms sales as an apparatus. Here's a quote from the dissent about the discourse in the round, and also from all their 1AC framing contentions, where they say that form shapes content, and it's about their intentions for determining whether it's a good idea. Our evidence in the 1NC says that it's critical in order to determine the consequences, which is what the intent of the resolution is. Plus, even if we don't win that it's the intention of the resolution, we can still win that our model of debate is better, because at best there's zero predictability differential between our interpretations. Second is the simulation violation argument. We'll win all of our empirics claims about why this simulation is the real one, or this world is the real one. That necessarily means that the app is extra topical from a simulation perspective in the context that we have the empirical existence now. The app is only topically allowed to shift to an imaginary world in which the only distinction between our world and the imaginary one is a reduction in arms, but the app gets to fiat an entirely new simulation, not one of the many ones, but one in which they arbitrarily conduct and can shift the flows, i.e. they could create a simulation that's just like, here is a world where arms are axiomatically bad, and then it creates terrible debates where the affirmative wins every time. Two impacts. First is fairness. Even if debate can be more than the game, it fundamentally relies on competition of function, proven by speech time spreading, the fact that they want the ballot, and when the 2R stands up and talks about how he dropped that framework is equal to the war on terror. Only impact that when fairness declines, the activity becomes less valuable for everyone, leads to decision based on judge biases, which is worse. It's the only impact the ballot can solve, and if you disagree that fairness is an important norm, then just vote neg, even if they win on the flow. Second is clash. Individual debates don't shape subjectivity. The judge voting app won't magically change anyone's mind, and a plethora of external factors also shape our viewpoints: family, school, friends, reading, etc. The one only mechanism through which debate can change how people think is through in-depth clash at the margins that results in debaters being more knowledgeable, more self-reflexive, more able to craft better strategies to accomplish this goal. It solves their offense on a broader scale, because their offense is about entrenching a dogmatic belief in their app and ideology, whereas our offense is about being able to better discern the truth across a wide range of issues. It also broadly turns their offense, because the reason they think storytelling is good, they believe storytelling is good, but they can use storytelling scenario planning to tell the 1AC, but instead determine the winner based on the consequences of hypothetical implementation within the real world, instead focusing the debate on storytelling good bad refers to endless trash meta debates about debate that foreclose developing substantive view on the relative efficacy of different stories, which turns the reason they think it's good, because it results in better material outcomes for Black people. Filter all their offense through two framing issues. First is competition key. This was really bad in 1AC cross-size. All the reason why it's important for us to disagree with their simulation. The app has lots of cards that say us talking about and simulating this thing is good, but they have zero reason why debating within those simulations are good, which we've won at the top is axiomatically impossible, which proves that they turn debate into a monologue, and it proves that the forum isn't key and the ballot isn't key. Second is the TVA. Their app is an easy one. They could read their app, do science fiction storytelling, but just do it in this universe, make an analogy between the two, talk about why the story says something about the stuff in this universe, and if they're correct about their broad offense about why scenario planning is good in a way to help Black people cope with the real world, then those advantages should make sense. They just then don't read an advantage about why storytelling is good and then say they should win because their storytelling is good. The counter-interpretation is infinitely regressive, allows apps to garner offense based on moral truism or extra topically fiat mindset shift that are unpredictable and albeit relevant. Political cost of applying makes prep impossible, framing through moral hazard. Even if the app seems reasonable, their interpretation justifies app that reduce the sale of one weapon and read a rep advantage about civil forfeiture regulations. App that read reps advantage to solve all disads, pass USMCA, invest in the DIB, help Russia decide they shouldn't fill in, have Japan decide not to proliferate, establish an NFU, infinite backfile checks that it could never meaningfully prepare for, fiating massive movement, or Congress traverses the Lacanian death right, overcome the fear of death, or just become really nice people that sing kumbaya, or read any interpersonal argument. This app makes me feel good, my poetry is good, storytelling is good, etc., and can center debate based on intention, which are subjective, non-falsifiable, etc. In order for us to win, I'd need to win that Matthew is a bad person who wants bad things to occur. These destroy fairness and clash. Two internal links. First, it's predictability. Unpredictable shifting the terms of debate nullifies the benefit of in-depth preparation, force the negative debate the app on terms that make third and fourth level testing impossible. Second is utopianism. Every reasonable criticism of utopian proposals like end all arms sales are based on existing in an imperfect world where the actions have large political costs domestically and to our adversaries, allowing the app to bypass these concerns, crushes in-depth policy analysis, force the negative run to absurd extreme. They say that fiat is sci-fi. We'll concede this. This means we solve your offense about sci-fi. The distinction between the two is our form of sci-fi is better and helps us learn more about the real world and come up with better coping strategies while preserving a role for the negative, whereas their sci-fi detaches so far from the real world there's no educational value, and it could leaves the neg without a meaningful role in the debate. They say that procedurals are bad, that beg the question of model no substantive credit if we win that they're missing on the uniqueness question because substantive can't occur in their debate, and competitive incentives cause a shift. They say there's no binary between discourse and policy. This is an intentional misinterpretation of terms. Just because discourse can have broad effects on society doesn't mean that when we're talking about policies and debate, the way that Matthew described the 1AC necessarily needs to affect whether reducing arms sales is a good policy. There's also, even if they're right that form shaped content broadly, there's not debate key or reasons why we should discuss the form and the content of how Matthew gave the 1AC. Content exclusions are also inevitable and good. We can't talk about everything, and if we attempt to, we'll never really learn anything in depth, which is why it's good to limit the topic to some degree. And science fiction is bad. That's on case. Our education is inevitable. That's right. No, 77, 59% of 7th to 12th grade instruction utilize some sort of science fiction in the classroom instruction, populated numerous science fiction movies and television shows. Imagination of a science fiction within general public have been stimulated by science fiction, television novels. The next argument is that infinite worlds. This is wrong. It's about like quantum theory. This is heavily disputed among scientists. We don't have that, but theirs isn't particularly qualified either. Second, it's a misinterpretation. Their argument, the quantum many worlds theory, isn't that like there's infinite universes and you can just imagine whichever one you want and that is the universe. It's just rather that during a bunch of particle interactions, things can minorly change based on probability function, which doesn't lead to their simulation, which is still extra topical. Third is that analyzing the past ones and different simulations that could have branched off is a waste of time because our current empirical existence can't be one of those. The counter-interpretation should is just a bastardization of this card. Is the fighting should in the sense is they should pass a law to sterilize us. We agree that should in the abstract could refer to discussing minority issues, but it's not in the context of revolution, except for in the context of the TVA, which is a viable version of it, which proves that our interpretations are compatible, but ours includes less. The neurological shift argument is fake. There's no evidence or studies or warrants within their evidence. You should be highly skeptical of any card debate that says the word neurology and that doesn't use any evidence for it. We also solved this. There's no specific internal link to T, and we've won that with all the no trade-off arguments above. They say they have to comport with linear historicity. That's inevitable from the real world because you live and have to deal with history, but the world being bad is a reason to change it and deal with it earlier. There's also no trade-off because you can imagine science fiction and still go and live through the real world. They say limits explosion inevitable, will concede T subs, and that solved AF ground, which mitigates those process counter AFs can be limited out via T. Proves it's a good norm. Yeah. I'll enter the wipeout stuff. They say that nuclear won't hit Africa. First, it would end civilization even if it doesn't hit Africa because of nuclear winter, which causes famines and spreads worldwide. Second, it would take out the simulation if the Western's running it, so then everyone in there would die. The counterforcing in BMD doesn't matter because one, BMD is too ineffective to intercept enough nukes, and second, it would still cause nuclear winter when from the country that decides to counterforce. The no alliances also begs the question of the simulation. Plus, given they can arbitrarily shift what the course of the simulation is. Case framing. The consequences bad argument is a tautology because the impacts to why consequences are bad is that it results in bad consequences, i.e. more racism, less outcomes for bad people. They say you can't quantify it. That's wrong. It's a comparative. Even if I can't say there's like 3 violence globally, I can still compare different forms of violence in order to make a consequentialist decision and good action. They say it justifies slavery. This is exactly backwards. The road to evil is paved with good intentions. All the people who justified slavery had good intentions, but consequences because of how bad slavery are would obviously reject it. And their evidence agrees with us. The case itself. Science fiction fails because it ropes into enclaves that can't be broadly reached to change anything. There's no evidentiary basis for their simulation. It's warrantless, and they're a bad way to make decisions, which was primarily on topicality. They also can't solve because the U.S. has nukes inevitably and a bunch of other historical advantage against Africa. There's no reason the arms scale is key to the solvency, and the simulation argument is not supported by any of their evidence. It's just an assertion for them, and yeah, whatever. I can't get it. Bill and Turns case. That's all I need. I'm good for cross.
Okay. The T stuff, how is it possible to verify the existence of one world absent reliance on intuitions?
Well, you rely on empirics. So here's the big framing issue, right? Philosophy is impossible to determine. We can't trust anything we see, yada, yada, all those things. Any interpretation of how the world works is inherently tautological and non-falsifiable. You're correct about that. But empirics is the best way to associate with the world, which is proven by all the 1AC claims where you say black suffering is bad, like psychic violence is bad, etc. Because it proves that the only way that we can know those things exist or figure out that those things exist and are bad is by analyzing empirics. And there was also the probabilistic argument I made in the 1AC, which is that we can't know for sure it's true. But like if I drop a pen 10 times, it drops each time. I can guess it's likely to do that in the future. Yeah, what's up?
What constitutes empirical factors?
Well, right, just like things we have perceived in the fact and using those to scale up and make intuitions about how the world works.
Okay, how do you know that everyone perceives this world that you have described?
I mean, we don't, but we can approximate that it's roughly similar based on discussing with other people and making approximations. I mean, again, all these arguments you're making are tautological because you presume, like, when you made all those arguments about why sci-fi is good and all the framing preempts, you were like, black suffering is a thing that broadly exists. It's supported by a historical legacy of racism, all of which are empirical claims that presume that people have, like, similar perceptions of how the world works.
What would it take for the 1AC to use history to prove that it is true?
Wait, what do you say? Sorry?
What would it take for the 1AC to use history to prove that it is true?
To prove that, like, that there's the general guy and that all the alliances are dead and there's a simulation, or what?
How do we
like I'm not sure. To prove that the, like, consequences of the 1AC are true, or what?
To prove that, like, General Major Gentle exists or General Tory exists, what would we have to do to you?
Well, I mean, you could, like, look in the past and see, like, there was this guy who called himself General Major Gentle, and so he supposedly.
Okay, can there be a world where something exists and simultaneously a world where that something does not exist?
Well, it is possible, in fact, to have two different worlds, one in which something exists and one in which something doesn't exist.
Okay, so then how do we link to any of your offense about saying certain things don't exist?
Well, right. Our whole point is that you can hypothetically imagine another world where these things don't exist, but it's not the world we're in. And we should make decisions according to the world that we are most likely in.
The fact that the 1AC operates under a different world.
Huh? What do you say?
Where have you read evidence that all humans operate on the same consensus or a
well, you made a bunch of arguments on the dissent that's like, haha, not in our simulation. Here, China doesn't exist and doesn't want power. Ha ha ha.
Okay.
Like, there's, like, all of these arguments are self-serving and arbitrary interpretations of which world we.
I'm just asking, what's the violation to the text of the 1AC's interpretation?
The violation of the text of our interpretation?
Yeah.
Our interpretation is that the only distinction between this empirical reality and the 1AC's hypothetical reality can be less arms sales.
Okay.
That can be the only difference. And then also that the ballot needs to go to the team who best demonstrates the relative consequences of the action. So that's what should means, is the other portion of the violation. Those are the two.
The 109 was sent. I'll give the order in a sec. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, the order is going to be the science pick, the courts counterplan, the alliance disad, and the China fill-in disad. Is anyone not good?
Hold on a second, I'm downloading it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm good.
Sweet. Tag pick concede the perm just to test competition, no offense on the floor. The court's counterplane will concede permutation. It was just to test competition conditionality. Counter trip. We get what we did. Counter trip. Dispo. They didn't ask logic. You shouldn't vote half if the status quo is better. Neg flex. We need some space to make up for Ned's half side bias, personalized speech, expertise bias, vague plans, tweets, reframing, and new apps. Innovation without fallback. Teams will never break new arcs or experiment with policy and critical arguments. Still incentives to do research because it makes the counterplane better and skews inevitable speed. T just said they need to win. We make debate impossible. Non-resolution. Actually, skip that. But T precedes substance. They started it. All the other reasons are reasons to reject the argument, not the team. The allies just said all the tricks were answered on top. So I'll start at the impact level. Deep engagement solves global power wars. Provides the economic support and regional presence to uphold deterrence and reassurances. Regional allied against the need to proliferate, which goes nuclear through accidents and user elusive pressures. Even if it doesn't always get to a full nuclear war, it's still a massive drawn-out war that causes lots of minority deaths. They also drop two external impacts, which are warming, causes mass death through the editors to the clean energy cooperation with Africa, which allows better access to material energy strategy for those people, and space colonization, which allows Africa to get on board the space train and release themselves from their dependence on other nations such as the U.S., Russia, and China. The hegemonic discourse argument one is the card says absolutely nothing. You can read through it. Just as that some discourse is violent, but not ours too. I'll answer the tag with the last card we read in the 1 and C. The discourse of AFRICOM may seem bad to some critics, but the U.S. was actually freeing Africa from a lot of their dependence on other countries such as China, who were trying to use it for economic gain. So it's the best of two worlds, which also answers an argument on their argument on the bottom of the alliance set about conditioning bad. The link level plan decimates U.S. ability to build strong economic relations to Africa. Africa wants security first. It's a prerequisite to development and a key signal that the U.S. places their demands over its own strategic interests, which is key to make U.S. initiatives effective. That's friend. Arms sales are the critical to relationship building. The link is reverse causal. Link to 12. Security guarantees are visible signals of commitment. Patrons has continuously reassured allies to support presence of military relationship is most significant traits for conventional arms countries that accepted arms under operated under the assumption that such an acceptance is due to illicit substance alliance with Washington. Countries that receive U.S. arms are hosted military advisors and technicians building stronger and overall military to military relationships. China also has things to offer, which takes out a lot of the link level here as well. The uniqueness debate, Brand's card is all in the context of East Asia, not applicable to Africa. They don't see the spillover because there's not a common ground, and there's a lot of more military integration with Africa that hasn't been reduced. Force them to read specific thumpers. The U.S. is great in Africa now. Garrigmon, 19. The U.S. needs to remain engaged country with interagency partners. Africa command implement defense strategy, bilateral engagement to strengthen security, increasingly so important and effective regional organization to encourage cooperation. Threats are transnational in nature. The G5 Sale Hill Alliance improves security capabilities. Defense institution building is a huge priority. Focus on foundations, multi-tier effect, trade power competition with China and Russia continues. In Africa, Russia is an arms supplier. China has long-term strategy. The Phil set. Chinese SOA expansion against nuclear removes the pacifying effect of U.S. leadership and causes countries like Russia. Oh, the U.S. hedge arc back on the alliance said it begs the question of consequences. If we're right that it's good, then it should be advocated for. It's not racist. It's not if it's consequential, it's a decision that minimizes harm to black folk. Saying that unipolar military balance is good is distinct from saying that all global policing is good. That's what their card is about. Fill in. Chinese SOI expansion goes nuclear, removes the pacifying effect of U.S. leadership and causes countries like Russia, China, India, Japan, and Iran to bid for power and genders insecurity, massive refugee crisis, and encourages revisionist to directly challenge the U.S., which escalates. That's finding Hearn's case. China has expansionist and selfish means in Africa specifically. She institutes labor camps and minority oppression in his country, and we do the same if the global regime. We also have evidence that they are expanding their national influence to serve their self-interest, which necessarily means devaluing their prioritization of African nations. The uniqueness debate. The U.S. is outcompeting China. Liberal CAT policy cut to past bureaucracy and expands our sales. The U.S. is outcompeting China now. That's crucial for strategic competition. But Singer, 19. China remains the smallest arms exporter compared to the U.S. Overall dependent on sales. A few countries increasingly oversee arms sales being used as a tool to advance their strategic interests. Self-evident and growing range of Chinese arms sales to Africa and in readiness to sell most advanced weapon systems with no strange attached prices below Western, and increasingly figure in the growing strategic competition influence the conflict of alliance in different geographic areas. U.S. influence in Africa is dominant now, but China is willing to millerize their office. Actually skip that card. Even if they win Russia, it doesn't matter. Our arguments are just about how Chinese influence affects U.S. balance. And even if they win, that China does have some influence now, the U.S. still has more within it, and it's linear. The link debate, China will definitely fill in and use it for expansion. It's a strong interlink. Matthew 17 paging endgame is longer term geopolitical strategic influence. No question as policy appeals to second and third tier military states. The opportunity to diversify versus China is amenable to a tech transfer. They'll fill in the gap. Arms sales are a proxy for influence. Rubin 14. Other governments will fill the gap. China would become more influential country to our interests, encouraging aggression and damaging U.S. influence. Aid serves to secure basing rights over flight peerages and access for instituting military recessions. Aid as an instrument of power can be incentive for countries to change behavior.
We'll take prep.
Stop prep 546. The order is the advantage, then framing, then the alliances disad, the China disad, and then T. Okay. Is anybody not ready? Okay, cool.
The role of the judge is a signal and orientation of black desires beyond white universes. They concede debate as a storytelling arena where imagination creates reality through unconscious determinations of actions as pragmatic. Two impacts that outweigh their off cases. First is colonialism allows major gentles to win the occupied war by preventing Toro's coercive armed strategies and ending feminine property from exploitation. Second is narration, propagating African stories unaligned with Western history, combat tropes associated with uncivilized, generating the spiritual energy necessary and minority communities survive. Alters neurologically how people code the human engage with minorities through subverting hegemonic discourses, stories that catalyze political change. They say sci-fi is not pragmatic. Our simulation can't change that. Read the breakout evidence that effectively moves people to engage politics, like the Yes We Can movement ran by Obama, which was a form of imagination. They say the U.S. have nukes that'll be on that'll be on the disc below. They say that our evidence is supported by anything. We don't need determined reality blocks out those without institutional power, academia to create to talk about reality. Plus, we could tag all our stories very 20, which makes fabrication ineffable framing. Consequences bad isn't tautology. Actions are bad because of their consequences, but their intent. They drop their framing is bad because you wouldn't tell MLK not to give speeches given the possibility of KKK lash out or conclude slavery was bad through consequences by inherent wrongs. Nope, slavery wasn't caused by good intentions. Instead, we're to violate the unconditional worth of humanity. The allies said. Nuclear winter wouldn't happen since nukes were dismantled before Western countries went into simulations, which would prevent all war. But if when nukes do exist, nuclear war would be good. Nuclear testing already occurred in Africa before Western countries retreated into simulation. Makes the impact non-unique, but nukes would destroy Western world, which is good to end colonialism. Counterforcing would work. The BMDs are sufficient to counterforce a minuscule number of nuclear bombs that would be launched. The fact that Western powers have tested nukes in Africa already solved warming, since nuclear cooling offsets the effects of warming, which answers case arguments. They can see no link country governments don't exist now. It means there will be no perception of any alliance declines. Also means other countries' militaries can't exploit since they were dismantled. Once countries went to simulations, mean Africa can't be exploited. China. They can see China doesn't exist. They're living in computer simulations now. It means they have no incentive to expand arms sales post plan. It also can't turn the case since China lives in simulation. We have said that the ethical consequence of ending U.S. colonialism in Africa is good. T. We meet plaintext in a vacuum. Any violation the 2NC has is just standard for solvency. We solely defend governmental FMS and DCS reduction. Non-resolutional demands create an endlessly shifting goalposts that detract from substantive education. Any other metric allows for ask tangibly about the topic to meet. Since the plaintext isn't basis for topicality. The first violation literally makes zero sense. It's a framing question about intent. You can answer that by saying you feel good. Our argument is you should evaluate your action based on intent. You can say that you can evaluate based on consequences under our topicality term as well. The second violation, we read a piece of evidence that supports excess matter theory, proves that there are infinite universes where some things exist in one universe, but not the other. It proves we can't fiat certain things existing or not, but their mastery to control one real world is an investment in anti-blackness that sidelines legitimate black futures, and every limit disad links to their offense. That's a historicity disad. Their example of an abuse may be a bit savory, but that doesn't exist here. It's a core distinction. We've just said certain things exist or don't. Not that certain things are adequate. Since there exists no universes where things are de facto good or bad. Intuitions are not sufficient. They prove offense reliance on institutions demonstrate absolute truth is a myth and relies on an external standard on it is impossible. We have empirics. Their refusal to export African stories as a common ground demonstrates whitenesses, expansion into Germany, marginal psyche, procedural fairness and clashes wrong. They can see that we link turn it. Their quote unquote real world interpretation puts black students upon a double standard upon black students. The TVA sees power from the TVA sees the form of storytelling to academia, allowing it to continue defining what is pragmatic and utopian scenario planning, casting out African narration as a method of creating cultures of survival as uncivilized and idealistic, which saps spiritual energy from black people as it destroys all revolutionary potential. And it is the affirmative. They conceded that it neurologically it binds itself into white people as defined, allowing them to define neurologically defining what is a human. That we do have evidence that supports this metric evidence. Their critique of quantum theory is wrong. It does prove our simulation, since if there is a world where something exists that is not a diametric combination, that there is a possibility that it does. Our science is correct, since reliance on intuitions proves that when it sees world is theoretically possible. Counterterp should need to analyze racial narratives inside the resolution, mitigates their influence often, since it's centered around the topic. They tried to perm the counterterp. However, the counterterp results. Yeah, I did all the. Yeah, I did that above. The sci-fi education Neville card, this card is asked sci-fi's Neville, but it's shitty racist sci-fi now. The app is key to inject new forms of African sci-fi into academia, which is dominated by white stories about Africa now.
Okay, we used. I think we're still at 9:40. Yeah.
I'm good. Okay, here's the order. It's a pretty lengthy one, so hopefully everyone's good. It's going to be the fill-in disad, the allies disad, extra T, framing advantage. Is anyone not ready? Awesome. Quickly extending fill-in in case I win the simulation arguments because it's an independent reason to vote for negative. The first argument is that China doesn't exist. Yes, they do. That's an equal and opposite to certain each way. So you should assign it a 50% probability because they have no distinguishing words. Our intention are also good in the context of this dissent because we want to help people in Africa more, which proves that it flips both ways. And consequences is the only tiebreaker. They've dropped that sphere about influence expansion that way. China will expand into Africa. The U.S. gets out of that, which causes them to take over influence, cause a bunch of wars. The collapse of globalism and nuclear conflict as the U.S. tries to reclaim its balance. Now, next argument is that ending colonialism is good, but you don't solve that. You can see China fills in, makes the colonialism worse in Africa, which our evidence has statistical studies to back up. The Allies will answer all the nuclear war doesn't matter things. First is nuclear testing makes it non-unique. Those are way smaller, don't cause extinction or mass death. Nuclear, which is far larger, which you should care about linearly. Second, they say destroying the Western world is good. No wars, and the war is in Africa, you genius. It's obviously kills more African people because that's where the nukes are dropped. Second, what happened to the whole unconditional human value thing that you were talking about on framing proves that that's a bad thing as well. It doesn't actually solve any of their impacts. Next is counterforce, but there's still a nuke winter even if you counterforce some of the weapons. Second is that we have trash accuracy from ballistic missile defense. They have no evidence. It's not sufficient to stop it. Next, there's nuclear cooling offsets warming. The impact of warming is environmental. The nuclear cooling will still destroy biodiversity and cause all the deaths, which is sufficient to trigger our impact. They don't cancel out. That's silly. Framework. Our interpretation, it's impossible to justify an app ballot. Here, the word fairness is not said once in the 1AR. There's no ballot or competition keyword. First is the ballot pick clear, and the 2NC totally dropped. You can agree with everything in the 1NC. Tell them their science fiction is good. They have no reason why they need to get the ballot for it. No reason why negation is key, which proves that fairness is the only impact that your ballot can solve, and the only justification for it. There's have no role for the negative in debate because they have reasons why them saying science fiction is good and providing it, but they have no reason why it's good for us to disagree with them. They also concede that fairness is the precondition for the debate. Why are we flowing? How does debate make any sense absent fairness, etc.? The alternative causes judges to lapse on the bias. It makes debate less valuable, makes everyone less motivated, etc. It's a precondition for any possible impact. Second, if they drop the debate, doesn't shape subjectivities. Individual round can't change the contours of our imagination, and so many all cause that way. Also proven by the fact that people read arguments they don't believe in all the time. The only way that debate can actually shape our subjectivity is far more nuanced and long term by making us a little bit smarter and more knowledge, which turns their offense because the reason they think science fiction is good is because it results in better outcomes for Black people. Line by line. First argument is that non-rest is shifting goalposts. First, it is based in the result. Our interpretation of the rest has two components. First, the app doesn't get to select a world. The only distinction between the empirical world and the one imagined by the plan should be less arms are sold, which is an extra T-based argument. Second, it should means the debate is about consequences of arms, not the way the app describes things and what their intentions are. Their first argument is non-rest that was answered above, but even if our offense massively outweighs, they continue to expose limits. I'm not going to go through the same case list. It's not like a normal framework that it makes debate slightly less good. Their interpretation literally breaks debate. They concede that they can read an app where they specify one of the many worlds where arm sales are axiomatically bad and the neg can't say anything or just say my intentions are good and that's the whole one I see and then sit down and then read a plan text and then the neg also has nothing to say. They say the first is a framing question. No, it doesn't. We've defined words based on should. Says it has to do with consequences. Second, it is a framework question because it's a question of how you evaluate the debate, not just about what makes actions good or bad. This next is infinite universes. All group that debate here. If we win this, we can win even if we lose framework. There's two sorry, put that on another flow. It's wrong, 3 reasons. First, it begs the question of a larger scientific debate in which they're the minority science for. They don't have the quals to make this with great claims requires great evidence. Second is they're butchering the theory. There's minor differences based on probability function, but not something as drastic as the app. Third, its alternative universe could have been created in the past, but that's irrelevant because we can't reach any of those. We can only alter which ones occur in the future via changing our actions. They say their works are basically just, but you can't know anything for sure, but you can make probabilistic assessments, which is good because we need to make changes to empirically improve the world, which is proven by the tautological nature of all their arguments. They've said that we need to dismiss consequences because it results in bad things for Black people. So scenario planning is good because it results in good things for Black people. These are all consequential claims that prove the merits for us. It's also normatively bad because we should care about real world improvements, anything. And if we win this but lose T, you should vote neg because the app is bad and we've impact turned their methodology. Back to the line ballot. They say one world decimates black futures. No, there are other new potential future worlds like the plan. They can see the plan as an example of good science fiction. They just can't do all their framing contentions. It's where the only difference is the reduction in arm. And you also don't need to literally believe that science fiction works, or you don't need the ballot in order to solve any of this. The historicity just said you've dropped. It's inevitable from experiences with real life that people have, and that the TVA solves this because you can break out of it. They say that intuitions are deficient, empirics with answer above. They say there's no absolute truth. Probabilistic claims solve this. They say that stories are evidence. No, because your evidence literally says fiction in it. It's not an evidence based on empirics, but what people imagine. They say it's absurdal energy. The TVA solves this because they can read the app, but not with all their preempt shenanigans that they can win the debate on independently. They say there's also no endpoint to that energy or reason it's good. Clash also solves because we can better find endpoints. They say neurologically framework that has no internal link to the neurology stuff. They say their evidence also has no qualifications and individual rounds can't counterinterpret, should analyze. They drop the indite. It's not in the context of the resolution. It's in the context of an entirely different phrase. The framing, we should care about consequentialism. Any other thing else, it's logical, which is all the thing above. Both of the examples they give, consequentialism would determine the opposite way, and the role of the ballot and stuff on cases all solved by framework. I answered all of it on the line by line. Our framework solves, it comes first.
Oh, 550. I'll start prep. Wait, what was the argument you made in the middle that was like, if we win this, the app is independently bad on T?
Just like the simulations arc. Like independent of T, if we win simulations, it disproves the method of the app.
The order is case, framing, the disside, and T.
Wait. I'm pretty sure it's the simulation arc. If you tell me where it is, it might be a different arc.
I got it.
Debate is an arena, storytelling is speech act, where imagination creates reality, proves the only role to judge is to build a beautiful universe of blackness beyond white colonial desires, means you have a categorical comparatives endorse black freedom trees traditionally dispensed by civil societies. The impact of storytelling, the plan expands debaters' conceptions of reality beyond one traditional schema. Blacks using the master's tool to create futures of liberation is monofuturism. The SAS, the potential for spirituality, since they tie HEC in the master's hands, is conspire to the dishats to give psychic energy to liberate beyond Afro-depressionism and battle fatigue, which is a prerequisite to hyper discussions. And they've also conceded it resolves colonialism because arms are being used in a cybergenic transformation technology for interoperability that creates lock dependency upon the master's ideals, provides the DRC civil war conditioning on counterinsurgencies, etc. The framing contention they've conceded consequentialism is bad. This is an implication because every impact of the dissent relies on the consequence of the plan, not its intrinsic evaluation. You shouldn't evaluate it since extinction outweighs. It's different from saying the consequence of an action leading to death is a good form of impact framing. Consequentialism is wrong. Prefer an intent-based framework which allows us to justify moralities. There's infinite speculative consequence, infinite speculative.
Sorry, I wasn't timing. Does anyone have time? Forgot to stop.
You're at 4:05.
Okay.
There's infinite speculative consequences in an action, but you wouldn't tell K now to process given KKK lash out that causes more deaths, and we don't have to engage in tons of calculations to determine that slavery is good or bad, but it's intrinsic wrongness. And if Gentile colonialism is intrinsically bad, which you've proven via the case debate, you have an obligation not to evaluate to this that was safe and seated, which doesn't matter, even if they win to tertiary is true. Good as the allies this and now. First is alliances don't exist. Alliances don't exist in the South. So all leaders in countries have moved into computer simulations to live in a life of descendants, which means that there wouldn't be any leaders in Africa to perceive alliance of clients. They are missing the boat with the dissent link debate. They concede from that military institutions like Africa don't exist, which means there wouldn't be any form of cooperation. Anyways, the whole what happened to the unconditional value of humanity thing doesn't make any sense. The only unconditional worth of humanity is to sacrifice the entire universe, since our entire argument is that the universe relies upon deleting Africa from the web archive, which is the Achama war unique to this claim that they have not contested proves nuclear war solved. They concede there are no nuclear weapons defense, that would be no nuclear winter attacks in the status quo because there are no nuclear weapons in existence. They were destroyed once Western powers started living in simulations in order to check annihilation. However, before all nukes were destroyed, they concede Western powers tested nukes in Africa, which is their nuclear winter stuff, which caused a cooling effect that would be offset by warming. So it cannot turn any of the case off into consequentialism stuff. Also applies topicality. After top, the valve pick is irrelevant. They haven't extended a net benefit besides fairness, and we never said that it's bad, so it doesn't matter. Neither their argument of the subjectivity, since our argument is never about knowledge production, with the ways their interpretation is exploited, deployed, and debate. Extend plan text in a vacuum. Expertise, non-responses. This is about the difference between the wording of the plan and their interpretation. They have no alternative basis for a plan text in a vacuum, but they concede anything else turns for offense that allows teams to be tangentially related to the resolution. If the plan is not the only thing that matters, extend the white narrative that said, here's how you should evaluate it. It's not a dissent to their model, nor the text as their interpretation, but an epistemic filter that questions whether you should evaluate the violation. An RFT that mirrors Jeremy's 2 and R insists that 1AC does not operate inside the reality that we all know and love. Is the very one that operates through the very same gut checks and denies the trope of black experience. The way they affirm the violation sees the control storytelling, accademic tropes, the line quote, the elite, and academia to define what constitutes pragmatism, utopianism, reality, empirics, etc., which are all codes from the 2 and C and 2 and R. Casting out African narration is a method designed as uncivilized and idealistic, which is spiritual energy from black people as it destroys all revolutionary potential. This is an independent external impact given the imagination phrase reality self and case and the fact that they have conceded the role of judge proves you have a categorical comparative to sideline violations that rely upon gut checks and empirical definitions. The expertise argument makes no sense. Extend infinite world series that intuitions are inherently in themselves unverifiable since they rely upon an external standard presumption, which they agree with, proves the reliance upon empirics is unverifiable. And if there's a world where we can imagine without there being a direct contradiction, that world is possible. The framing violation is incoherent. They concede you can reuse so bad, which solves all of your offense. They never conceded you could just read arms are perfect in some world, because we've only said certain things don't exist, not certain things are de facto good or de facto bad, which is impossible since everything is up to constitution. But even if this is true, that's inevitable given the thesis of infinite world theory. The minority in science argument is not argument. They have no evidence or arguments to back this up. We are not butchering science. We've made an argument that proves the world is the one that exists, because if we can imagine it, there's a possibility. For example, it is true that unicorns exist since there's a world that is true, but it's not true that a married person is not married. The argument that we can't reach any thesis in a matter since it relies upon the idea that we are not already in the simulation in the first place. We answer the solving science fiction offense inevitable. We conceded the 2&T card you read on science fiction and said that it's offense for us because people are taught shitty science fiction in the status quo to teach that Africa is a colonial wasteland that can be up to exploitation, but only the reintegration of reality solves all of this offense. Yeah.
Right.
Is that there's not one definition of what constitutes empirics? Even if their offense is persuasive, it's arbitrary at best and does not violate the text of the interpretation. Also the consequences of that. Good debate.
A good round.
Good debate.
Good debate.
Should we send out a card doc?
No, I'm good. I don't need cards.
Okay, figured, but.
Jeremy. Can you check your Facebook?
Wait, what do you say?
Can you check your Facebook?
Oh. Yeah, oh, gotcha.
By the way, Lex, just for disclosure purposes, what are you calling this app?
Black Juju Tech.
Digitech?
Okay, is everyone ready?
1 of 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
1 of 4.
Yeah.
Wait, is everyone here? My computer's a little bit weird right now.
I got the echo too.
I'm here.
Okay. Okay, so I voted neg. So I essentially think that the app is lacking impacts that are unique to their model of fiating within a different reality. So while I do agree that plain text in a vacuum is able to take out the intentions argument that the negative is making, I don't think that plain text in a vacuum is necessarily able to take out the argument of like, or should be able to fiat actions that occur within necessarily a different reality. So I now have to evaluate. I now have to try and figure out which impacts do I necessarily evaluate first, and end up concluding that the app is lacking impacts that are unique to your model of being able to fiat within a different reality. So you have so the impacts you've isolated on case, and then the I think you called it the white narratives dissad. Well, but both I don't. The impacts of isolated on case are probably resolved by the TVA, such as like read those as analogy, but still have the fiat occur within like the empirical world, which the negative is isolated. The empirical world is one that can be evaluate the past and tested for future. I think the TVA is able to resolve some of those advantages. So I look at the white narratives dissad. And you even flagged it in the 2AR is not necessarily as much of a dissad to their model, but a question of like which impacts do I evaluate and how should I try and filter them. So I look at that and like how should I like evaluate fairness as it operates like within this debate round. And then it gets a bit messy because I don't have a ton of great offense from the affirmative against like the negative fairness push that are like I think the negative has done a good job at like the top of like the framework portion of the debate as to like why it's a necessarily good impact and why necessarily voting negative is not a disagreement with the affirmative, but rather it could be a way. It's just essentially a method of making the debate more fair. And you need more explicit answers to like some of this top level stuff that they've been saying. So like essentially the way you could be able to win is to have just like more clear answers to fairness. I don't think the question of like, are all these realities real? Yes or no was less important to my RFD because I think that it's not a question of it's not to me it was not as much of like how much like are infinite realities real? Yes or no, but whether or not the affirmative should be able to talk about a potentially different reality. But I ended up determining that it was like gutted fairness because it becomes impossible to be able to predict which reality the affirmative could take place in. You can end up operating within a reality that could like have arm sales just automatically be bad, so it's impossible for the negative to win. Do you have any questions? I'm sorry, I feel like that was a little bit messy.
That makes sense.
Okay.
If nobody else is going to ask, do you think it's a good idea to just quickly extend a dissad in these kind of debates when you know?
I did not like the dissad extension. No. I think you should have just gone all in on like the framework debates because the dissad it didn't really I don't know. I'm glad I didn't really have to think about that part of the debate because that would have been a lot more messy to think about. But I think your time would have been more well spent just going all in on like the framework portion of the debate.
Yeah, I guess that does make sense. But I guess if in a world where we don't go to the dissad page, how should we preempt like the plain text in a vacuum? Because they do read like a topical plain text. How do you think we can preempt that better and more efficiently?
I was actually thinking about this. I think you should have extended the substantial definition that you read on the other T violation and be like plain text in the vacuum you still don't meet. I'm not sure if this is the card you read, but I know there's cards that say substantial means material. So it could be like even if other realities exist, it has to take place within the material one as per the resolution.
Well, that's even solutional support for our interp, but wouldn't they still meet under plain text to vacuum because their plain text just says substantial?
Yeah, their plain text does say Africa just regularly. It doesn't say anything sci-fi. So
yeah, but I think like questions like cross-X and stuff like that make it very clear the affirmative's operating not necessarily within that necessary within that reality, if that makes sense. So I think just like a quick extension, like quick cross application of like this substantial thing, you could just like force them to be like, yeah, the plain text in a vacuum is not necessarily topical if they've isolated that it takes place within like a reality that like is not the material one.
Okay, that makes sense. That's all I have. But